Weird Way Media.
Hello, twisted humans. Do you find yourself wanting to know more about the latest murder, conspiracy, cult, or haunting? Then this is the podcast for you. I'm Alicia. And I'm Sierra, and this is Twisted and Uncorked.
Brain fart.
How
we are. I don't. We are continuing our terrible serial killer story today. Not that the story is terrible, because we're really great at telling stories, but the serial killer is
the person. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Actually, I think might be the worst out of all of the serial killers we've covered.
It's really hard
in terms of
to
attitude,
justify, but
like he's just a dick. Like listening to him talk,
yeah.
I want to punch him in the face. But anyway,
it's hard to quantify. It's hard to decide, but he's up there. Anyway, before we continue into this awful information, let's start with fun facts. Let's have some fun. Tell me something fun.
I purposefully picked this fact because no one can think about a sloth and be unhappy.
Okay.
Because, you know, it's dark subject matter for this episode. So my fun fact is that sloths can actually hold their breath longer than dolphins, which I thought was nuts. They don't even need to go in the water. So
that's insane.
Dolphins need to come up for air every 10 seconds. But by slowing their heart rate, they can extend that period of time. Sloths can hold their breath for 40 seconds, as opposed to dolphins with 10 seconds. So I thought that was nuts.
Oh.
How long can you hold your breath for, guys? Tell me.
Not that long, but
40 seconds is a long time.
You know, the fucking world record is like fucking 7 minutes.
What? Okay, that person had to have been faking it. Like that episode of Friends when Joey's like breathing through his nose.
It was a magician. I don't remember which one. You gotta listen to Tennish to figure that out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Shout out Nicholas.
Nick. Always. He always can say shout outs.
Nick, we're gonna start charging you $10 per shout out.
That is not my fun fact because I don't actually know the fact. I just heard it. My fun fact is that libraries are funded or whatever. Well, duh. They're funded or whatever based on like if people check out enough books, right? And certain books, if they don't get checked out, they don't get kept. Like they'll get rid of them, they'll burn them or throw them away, or they won't keep them at the library if those books haven't been checked out in forever. So a library in Florida decided that she didn't want the books to be thrown away or burned or whatever. So she created a fake library card for someone named Chuck Finley and checked out 2,361 books just so they wouldn't be burned and taken from the library.
I'm obsessed.
In this fake person's name. Yeah, it's great. I love it.
That is maybe, if I had a gavel, I would dub that the greatest fun fact on the show, only because of our love of books. Our history has enough book burning in it, guys. Let's leave it alone.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
It is. It's great. I'm impressed.
Tied with the fun fact about Stephen King being in a band.
Oh,
it's tied with that.
Yeah. Book facts are awesome. Send us your favorite book facts.
Send us your favorite fun facts in general, because we would love to share some listener fun facts on the show.
Yeah. Also, send us a screenshot if you're listening to this right now. Where are you listening to us from? Is it on Apple? Is it on YouTube? Screenshot it, put it on your Instagram story, and tag us. What are you have to drink for us today?
I have had too much to drink while Sierra and I have been catching up. So if I'm extra giggly and silly today, guys, I am sorry. I had a glass of wine when I was getting ready after yoga, and now I'm drinking the other half of the White Claw that I used to make our sangria. I cheated a little bit. It has a flavor called citrus yuzu smash. And I was drinking it last night on my patio, reading a little clip of the book that I'm currently reading. And I was like, what the fuck is a yuzu? Which got me to our sangria this week. So a yuzu is a type of citrus fruit that is grown in New Zealand, parts of Australia, like warmer climate places. It looks kind of like an orange and a lemon made a baby. Like it is the shape of the orange, but the color of a lemon. And it is quite tart. So people actually don't enjoy like drinking it a lot on their own. And they enjoy putting it in ingredients instead. So I was like, you know what? Let's put it in a fucking sangria.
There you
So
go.
we have our white wine from last week. We have yuzu, mandarin oranges. I was trying to combine the sweetness of a mandarin orange with the tartness of a yuzu. And then I topped it with ginger ale. And I did 1 ounce of citrus vodka that I got as a gift, and it is absolute flavored citrus vodka, and it is quite tasty. So super simple: orange, yuzu, white wine, citrus vodka, and top it with ginger ale, and it is tasty. And my cup is from my brother's girlfriend, and it says drink wine, read books, be happy. Very
Nice.
on par with what we were just talking about. I'm guessing from the mug that Sierra is drinking a Mexican hot chocolate.
I was, but I drank it all while we were chatting. So no, I'm drinking water. One more thing before we get into the story, and that is a little promo from our friends Caitlin and Cassie over at Pacific Northwest Haunts and Homicides. So when we left off last week, we were in the midst of John Wayne Gacy's murder spree. Unfortunately, as we mentioned before, many of the victims were only known online for being just a victim, and details listed for them are as little as when they were last seen. It is important to stress that these were people. They did not deserve to die at the hands of this monster. They had hobbies and families and dreams. And they were loved, but we're doing the best we can. So let's continue with the timeline. Sometime between November and December of 1976, Gacy murdered 21-year-old Wayne Francis Alexander. Wayne, who went by his middle name Francis, last had contact with his family sometime in November when he had called to catch up with his mother. He was not reported missing, as his family believed that he had moved to California shortly after speaking with him, or at least that was his plan. He would be found buried beneath the room Gacy used as his office. On December 11th, 1976, 17-year-old Gregory Godzik disappeared. His girlfriend last saw him outside her house after the two of them had been hanging out in the evening.
As you do when you're a young adult teenager.
Of course.
You sneak over to see your significant other.
Gregory had been working for PDM for less than 3 weeks when he disappeared. One haunting detail is that Gacy had him dig trenches for some kind of drain tiles in his crawl space in the days leading up to his disappearance.
No.
Sadly, where many people would eventually be found.
Like literally having him dig his own grave. That's not okay.
When Gregory Godzik's car was later found abandoned, his parents and older sister contacted Gacy about whether he had shown up to work and when the last time he saw him was. He told Gregory's family that he expressed a desire to run away from home, and that's probably what he did. He said he didn't see him either.
Yeah, I always tell my boss when I want to run away from home, not the people closest to me. Yeah.
Yeah. On January 20th, 1977, 19-year-old John Sink went missing. His class ring was found later in Gacy's home, and according to friends, he had worked for PDM in the months leading up to when he disappeared. Gacy is not just a monster murdering these young men, but he is also profiting off of their belongings, such as by selling John Sink's car to one of his other employees for $300. On March 15th, 1977, 20-year-old John Prestige went missing. He was last seen leaving a local restaurant. In the days leading up to his disappearance, he had told police that he was excited to start work with a local contractor and to be able to make some extra money. He was buried in the crawl space of Gacy's home alongside another unidentified male who is believed to have been killed around the same time, according to forensics. On July 5th, 1977, 19-year-old Matthew Bowman left a suburban train station outside of Chicago and told his mother he was going to a court appointment. He was never seen alive again. A few months later, Matt Rossi, one of Gacy's employees, the one he sold John Sink's car to, was arrested for trying to steal gas.
Another police ran his citizen.
Well, when police ran his license plate, they traced the car back to Gacy. And then when they ran the VIN, they learned that the car was registered to John Sink. But Gacy told the police John had sold him the car for the money he needed to get out of town. Police were so close to stopping all of this, but they had no way of proving that, this isn't what actually happened. No suspicions, really. So police didn't press the matter any further. On September 15th, 1977, 18-year-old Robert Gilroy went missing. He was reported missing pretty much immediately, as he was the son of a Chicago police sergeant.
I'm not one of those kids that ran away.
Right. He only lived 4 blocks away from John Wayne Gacy with his family, so it's likely that Gacy saw him walking in the area, leading to an abduction.
That's terrifying.
10 days later, 19-year-old John Mowry went missing after leaving his mother's house. He was a former U.S. Marine and was over that night for dinner. He would later be found with strangulation marks in the crawl space below Gacy's master bedroom. Russell Nelson was 17 years old when he went missing on October 17th, 1977. He was last seen leaving a local bar, and at the time of his disappearance, he was looking to get another job in contracting. It's likely that Gacy had offered him a job before murdering him. Russell's body would be found below the guest bedroom in Gacy's home. On November 11th, 1977, 16-year-old Robert Winch went missing, would later be identified in Gacy's crawl space. A week later, on November 18th, Tommy Bowling went missing after leaving a local bar. On December 9th, 19-year-old David Talsma, a U.S. Marine, went missing after attending a rock concert in Hammond, Indiana. His body shows signs of strangulation with a ligature when he was recovered in Gacy's crawl space. And it just keeps on happening. I will say, one of the things that freaks me out the most is, I don't think, there's not a trap door in Gacy's house. You know what I mean? He's, putting them in there. How is he getting them in there? He, a live person, is dragging bodies down there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He has to be. Because they're all in different parts of the house.
Yeah, no, you're right. And if anyone has seen photos of the crawl space that John Wayne Gacy had under his house, it is maybe 3 feet above the dirt. So yeah, you're digging spaces, but it's a mess. It's a mess.
He's crawling around, decomposing bodies to fit other bodies.
Through his floor. Yeah. And did that. That's a horrifying thought process that I didn't even think of when I was covering this. It's
one thing to have the ability, the cut off in your brain of, I just killed someone and I don't even care. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That is something that's really hard to switch off.
To crawl
around their bodies while they're decomposing with another one and feel nothing.
Mhm.
Oh God. Okay.
This is where the ranking of who's the worst. He's up there.
He's
Like,
up
not
there.
only did he talk about his victims like they were pieces of shit, nothing, he treated them as such because he's literally crawling on top of them to bury the next one. Like, you're forever reliving the offenses
If
that you've
I
committed and you're still okay with it.
exactly. A week and a half later, December 20th, 1977, 19-year-old Robert Donnelly was taken at gunpoint from a Chicago bus stop by John Gacy. Gacy drove to his house with Robert. If we didn't already know, like, this entire episode is a trigger warning, right? He drove to his house with Robert and proceeded to rape, torture, and drown him in the bathtub of his home repeatedly.
That's new.
When he would come to, Gacy would drown him again until he lost consciousness.
So he's waterboarding this poor kid.
Yeah.
All right.
After the torture, Gacy drove him to a random spot and told him if he said anything to police, no one would believe him because he was a well-respected businessman and it was his word against Gacy's. Luckily, he was spared and lived to tell his tale.
But at
Robert
what
Donnelly,
cost? Psychologically.
Robert Donnelly finally got the courage to report the incident on January 6th, but Gacy was right. When interviewed, Gacy was able to convince the police that the sexual relationship was consensual, which is, in general, so infuriating. But seeing that the police had already talked to Gacy about another missing persons case with John Sink's car, they should have seen the alarm bells here. In the later trial, Robert Donnelly testified that he was in so much pain during his torture that he begged Gacy to just kill him, which is just awful. Like, to know that that's what he went through and then had to live through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
that's what I mean. Like, at what cost psychologically?
Right.
You've gone through this. You have survived a horrific attack that many
no one
others
believed
did
you.
not get to. Yeah, and then on top of that, it's
Yeah.
like women run into this still to this day, but for men, like, especially in an era where it was so taboo, like, they would have just laughed in your face. Like,
Yeah.
makes me mad. Police today make me mad, but especially in the 70s.
Oh, yeah. On February 16th, 1978, 19-year-old William Wayne Kindren went missing after leaving a friend's birthday party and was never seen alive again. On March 21st, 1978, 26-year-old Jeffrey Rignall was picked up by Gacy with the promise that they would go back to his house to smoke weed. When Jeffrey got in the car, Gacy placed a chloroform-soaked rag over his mouth and face. When they got back to Gacy's house, he tied him up in a doorway and raped him with a very large sex toy. Jeffrey would go in and out of consciousness, and once he was completely out, Gacy dumped him in a park in the middle of the night. When Jeffrey woke up in the park, he knew something terrible had happened, with glimpses of the night before. He also had burns all over his face from the chloroform. He went to the police, but as being gay was considered very taboo, there was no real sense of urgency. How could one man possibly rape another?
All of these survivors are coming forward with a common fucking, well, I mean, in Jeffrey's case, it doesn't come up until later, the common name. But really, you're not going to take it seriously after that?
Yeah.
Yeah, whether or not it's a gay
intentions.
thing, somebody came forward a few months before this, having been raped. Like,
Jeffrey decided to take matters into his own hands and find out the person who did this to him.
Like, this
he
makes
rented
me
a car. I know. He rented a car and stalked out the last place he remembered driving to with Gacy. Thankfully, he ended up recognizing Gacy's Oldsmobile, taking down the license plate number. Now that he had the information he needed, Jeffrey went back to the police station, having done their work for them, and demanded that they follow up. Police would end up arresting Gacy for sexual assault and kidnapping on July 15th, But awaiting his trial for this, he was released on bond. And again, this is now the third incident of Gacy's name at the police station. So many other lives could have been spared if they took their job more seriously. Like, oh, that's weird. Also, this other thing was reported. Also, you had that missing kid's car. Like, come on. This is the easiest game of Clue in the world.
Like, even a separate from being in another state, his first charges for sodomy that he went to prison for in part 1. Separate from that, this is 3 incidences in Chicago,
3
Illinois.
strikes, you're out.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. This is just...
Nope. He's on bond. It's fine.
Yeah, let's just let him out. That's no problem. You'll be fine. No.
In June of 1978, Timothy O'Rourke went missing. He was last seen leaving his apartment to buy cigarettes from the corner store down the street. The night when he left, he told his roommate that he would be starting a job with a local contractor the following week. Timothy was 20 years old. On November 4th, 1978, 19-year-old Frank Landigan left his home for the last time. His father watched him walk away down the road, not thinking it would be the last time he saw his son. Frank's naked body was found on the inlet of Des Plaines River by 2 duck hunters on November 12th. On November 24th, 20-year-old James Mazzara left Thanksgiving dinner at his family's house. He had told his sister during that dinner that he was going to start working with a local contractor the following week. He was last seen walking in the direction of Bughouse Square. So, like Alicia mentioned in part 1, Gacy liked to cruise around the Greyhound bus station where runaways and boys who had nowhere else to go while figuring out their next move would hang out. The other place that Gacy learned he could pick up teens and young men was Bughouse Square, a square block radius in the downtown area where gay men would hang out to find their next sexual partners. Many of them were closeted at the time, and it was a safe space for them. A secret, a well-known meeting place in the community just by each other. Unfortunately, Gacy used that to his advantage. Using the same methods we mentioned in part 1, faking being a police officer, promising drugs, a job, a place to party, Gacy managed to entice these young men into his car and take control of the situation. He didn't see them as people, but as objects he could do with what he wanted. He would use the rope trick and the handcuff trick like we talked about, and these boys were incapacitated and unable to escape a horrific death. 15-year-old Robert Peist was a gymnast, a hiker, and a photographer. He worked as a stock boy at the Nissen drugstore, saving for a more professional camera for his photography.
The most wholesome thing I've ever heard.
I know. The last time he was seen, a local contractor had been in the store to quote some repairs. That contractor, as I'm sure you can guess, was John Wayne Gacy. Robert, eager to make some more money on the side, followed Gacy outside after the store closed to discuss a job opportunity and was never seen again. The investigation into Robert's disappearance would finally be Gacy's downfall. When Robert's mom came to pick him up from work, he was nowhere to be seen. She reported him as missing right away. The next day, December 14th, 1978, while looking into Robert's disappearance, investigators saw that John Gacy had been the contractor who was in the store because of a sign-in book at the front of the register. I feel like this was probably a fairly common thing in the 70s, you know, sign-in books and whatnot. Sometimes you want to think that these people who get away with killing so many people are smarter than to fucking sign their name. Like, let me just prove I was here. But we know that criminals are dumb.
Yeah. Traffic altercations.
Yeah.
Sign-in books. It's gonna get you caught.
Yeah. At this point, Gacy was out on bond for the attack on Jeffrey Rignall, They finally started putting it all together, and they just knew he had to have something to do with Robert's disappearance. Now they just needed to prove it. Digging into Gacy's past, the Des Plaines investigators learned of his past sodomy charges and his prison sentence back in Waterloo, finally. This, along with the most recent charges, gave them enough information to start a 24-hour surveillance on him. It didn't take Gacy long to know that the police were tailing him, and he started to test them, leading them on a wild goose chase. He made multiple stops, socializing with everyone he could, showing how loved he was in the community. He kept up his erratic speeding and driving, trying to lose the investigators as well. They couldn't just arrest him for a traffic violation, though. It had to be something that stuck. When questioned, Gacy told police that he had seen Robert in Wisconsin at a job site he had delivered to, and that he was just fine. Police were suspicious of Gacy, and as they looked into it, the number of boys he had been in contact with that disappeared disturbed them. But there were no bodies, no proof of foul play. Gacy complained about the detectives following him all the time, saying that they were bad for his business. Since they hadn't found anything, they were ordered to back off for a period of time by their higher-ups.
Maybe just don't murder people and you won't have police following you.
They couldn't follow him as closely, but they continued to interview people around him and people that worked for him. Someone had to know something, and they were desperate to find Robert Paste. Gacy noticed that the police were still around, though, and he was so cocky that he even invited them into his home for coffee. So this is where, like, criminals be dumb, okay? But it's fine. I'm glad.
Sign-in book.
I'm glad. Yeah. At some point, they were given a tip about John Sink's missing things. So when they were inside his home, they took it upon themselves to have a look around for the items or anything else that might connect him to the missing boys. While one cop was looking around Gacy's home, the other went to the bathroom. While he was in there, the heat in the house kicked on, and a putrid smell started to flood the room. It was sickly sweet and instantly recognizable as decomposition. There was a vent in the wall of the bathroom, and the police officer was certain that that was where the smell was coming from. He remembered that one of Gacy's employees, David Cram, was once interviewed, and they asked him about whether or not Gacy had a temper. David admitted that he had seen it a few times, specifically when he was digging in the crawl space of his house once. David was ordered to dig a rectangular hole for some alleged pipes that were going in, but he hadn't dug it straight, and Gacy lost it on him. After visiting the home and noticing the smell, police were desperate to obtain a search warrant to get under that house. And with the pressure surrounding the investigation of Robert Paste and the heavy police presence, Gacy was starting to lose it. During an interview with one of his lawyers, Gacy was asked about Robert Paste. His lawyer got very serious and yelled at him that a kid was missing and his family deserves answers. John spilled everything. He told him about every murder he had ever committed since moving back to Chicago. Of course, this was incredibly frustrating because no detectives were present, and while his lawyers knew everything now, they couldn't say anything about it. It would break client-attorney privilege.
I feel like there needs to be something in place, kind of like with a therapist.
Yeah,
that if you
where if they're hurting
express
someone,
a need or a want to hurt somebody or themselves, that privilege is broken. I feel like confessing to murdering 30 plus people is an instance where that needs to be broken. Like,
but however, in the event or in the interest of fair trials and whatnot, and knowing that so many fucking police officers force false confessions, at the same time, it just wouldn't work. Like it sounds good in a situation like this because we know John Wayne Gacy did it, but if the person is lying or was forced to confess or
But
whatever, then it
usually
would suck.
forced confessions
So,
happen in front of police officers. They don't usually happen in front of a lawyer.
right,
Like, your
but
lawyer is
that's
there to defend
because,
you regardless of what the fuck you did.
right. A lot of lawyers will tell you, don't tell me what you did. Like, you know what I
True,
mean?
because
Like,
it
most of
makes
them are
it
like,
harder
don't
to do
fucking
their
tell me.
job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's really hard to put a mask on and be like, I need to pretend that this person didn't murder 33 people
Well,
and put them under his house.
also, even with, I don't know if they did this in the trial or not. They didn't need to, never mind. But we'll get there. But also, even with attorney-client privilege, if you put the attorney on the stand, he's not allowed to lie under oath.
True.
So
Are you
that's
allowed
probably,
to do that? Lawyers, let us know.
they're allowed to plead the fifth,
True.
but that's it.
I feel really bad for like lawyers of serial killers because they're such high publicity.
Yeah.
They're always threatened, but in this case, like his lawyer was like 20 something at the time that he defended John Wayne Gacy. He had a family,
Yeah.
he had kids, and he's like, I still have to do my job, even though
Right.
I couldn't sleep for 4 days because of what you
Yeah.
told me. Like, yeah, it's a gray area. It's weird.
Yeah. Okay, so meanwhile, investigators are still tailing him, trying to get him on anything they could. On December 21st, 1978, detectives witnessed Gacy pass by a young kid and stick something in his hand. That something ended up being 3 joints. And at this point, okay, apparently he had even told the kid that the police were following him and he didn't want to get caught with it. But like, at this point, if you know the police are following you and you just put illegal substances in a child's hand, how do you not know you're going to get arrested for that? Like,
Yeah.
did he want to be caught at this point? You know what I mean? Like, there's no fucking way.
That's a good point. Like, maybe he just thought, like, it's already over. This
Yeah.
is easier.
Gacy then drove to his father's grave and sat there for a little while, and when he went to leave, police arrested him. A search warrant was finally obtained. During the initial search, they found a receipt for film developed at the Nissen drugstore where Robert Piest worked. Kim Byers, a co-worker of Robert's, told investigators that she had been wearing his coat that night because she was at the register closest to the door and it was cold. But when Robert went outside to talk to Gacy, he took his coat back.
And he's
For
a
whatever
fucking sweetheart
reason,
and let her borrow it.
I know.
Damn it.
For whatever reason, after helping a customer, Kim had stuffed that receipt in the pocket of the coat instead of in the trash. And it was a good thing she did. It told investigators that Robert had been in Gacy's home the night he disappeared. Following the smell, investigators were taken into the crawl space and thought that Robert had to have been down there. When they did find a body, it was very decomposed, too decomposed to have been Robert Piest, as he had only been missing 2 weeks at this point. As we know, what they would continue to find is absolutely heartbreaking. That December, detectives would continue to excavate bodies from John's crawl space. Like we had mentioned, the stages of decomp and the days that the boys went missing allow a bit of a timeline, but in many cases, their final moments remain unknown. To this day, 5 of the bodies recovered remain unidentified. We mentioned in part 1 that hundreds of people would come forward looking for their missing loved ones when the news broke, but some families refused to believe that their kids would be involved in anything gay and would never come forward looking for them.
Ugh.
Police urged families of missing loved ones to send in dental records in order to identify young boys found in the crawl space, as this was long before the time of DNA use in investigations. The forensics team was in way over their heads as detectives continued to recover bodies from underneath Gacy's home. The entire floor of the house ended up being removed. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen in their careers. Michael Bonin's fishing license was found in Gacy's home, and his family was notified on Christmas, which is fucking awful. This was one of the victims mentioned in part 1. His family refused to believe he had run away and continued to follow up with police, asking them to look into it, but they never did. They assumed he'd just come home. Other boys who were not reported as having been missing, but were found below Gacy's home, were Samuel Stapleton, who was last seen May 13th, 1976, Randall Raffett, who was last seen May 14th, William Carroll, who went missing on June 13th, 1976, and Michael Marino and Kenneth Parker, who were last seen on the same day, October 24th, in 1976. Gacy would end up drawing a map of his home and identifying places where he had hidden his victims that police hadn't even gotten to yet. In total, 33 teens and young men would be found on John Wayne Gacy's property. The community was in complete shock, rightfully so. This was supposed to be a safe place, and such a horrific crime had been committed. The media was a total circus reporting on everything as information came about, and many of the victims' families remember feeling like everything was all about John Wayne Gacy. He was this respected member of society, and no one could have ever suspected him.
Killer to killer.
Those boys deserved to be more of the focus. It was discovered that when John ran out of room on his property, he started to dispose of the bodies in various rivers, so we may not ever have a complete picture of all who were killed by him.
That's horrifying.
When Robert Peast's body had not yet been found at the property, it was discovered that he was one of the boys that ended up in a body of water. Investigators searched the surrounding waters for months and months with no avail. Chicago was experiencing a record-breaking winter at the time, which made efforts even harder. January of 1979 was known to the locals as the Deep Freeze, with huge snowstorms rolling in. It wasn't until April 3rd of 1979, when the waters had warmed up, that police would find the body of Robert Peast. On April 10th, 1979, John Wayne Gacy's home was demolished. A new one was eventually built in its place in 1986. From what we saw, the house was purchased and then sold, and then sat empty for more than 15 years. By the end of the investigation in 1979, 9 bodies were left unidentified, and the public funeral was held for those boys. On February 6th, 1980, John Gacy's trial began. Disgustingly, he seemed to enjoy all of the attention and being at the center of all the chaos he had caused. The trial lasted 6 weeks, and it only took 2 hours for the jury to find him guilty on all charges and to be sentenced to death. While in prison, Gacy filed for appeals and claimed he was innocent, even though he confessed everything to his lawyer and detectives. It's unclear why he suddenly started claiming he didn't ever murder anyone, saying he only helped cover it up.
It's almost like they panic and they're like, oh, I'm nearing the end of my life because of what I did. I need to try and change it.
Yeah.
It's weird.
After serving 16 years of his sentence, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection on May 10th, 1994. Allegedly, his last words were, "Kiss my ass," which feels very fitting for him since he was such an asshole throughout his life. The community partied in the parking lot of the prison, celebrating his death and feeling like justice had finally been served. We had mentioned in part 1 the murder of Michael Bonin and his father and young sister's recollection of the events and the trauma that it had on their family. She mentioned in an interview that to this day, she still hangs out with her brother's friends. They always toast and drink in Michael's honor and keep his memory alive in everything that they do. She says that she loved knowing that Michael was there, that he was part of a group, and that it broke her heart how little was known about the other victims of John Wayne Gacy. She wants people to know that, much like her older brother, these boys were here. They had made memories, they had existed, they had lives, hobbies, people that cared about them. They were here. It felt like that was the only fitting way to end such a horrific story, and hopefully we taught you guys something new. Speaking of something new, I learned in the new Nickelodeon documentary, Quiet on the Set, that the pedophile and abuser of Drake Bell, Brian Peck, was pen pals with John Wayne Gacy while he was in prison awaiting his death sentence.
Oh, good.
Brian even bragged about artwork that he was gifted from Gacy in jail and showed it to the children he abused at his house parties. That's some fun information.
That
What a
documentary
mess.
is nuts if you guys haven't watched it. Just like that tells you enough. Like, oh, this person idolized this horrific person and his artwork. Like,
Yep.
just
That's the kind of
we
person
talked
he
about
is.
it in part 1. Sierra has seen his outfit, or what did you see at that museum again?
Yes, his
Clown suit
clown
for Pogo the
costume.
Cop. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I saw his artwork that he painted of himself as a clown. So
Yeah.
just an awful egotistical person. But hopefully, yeah, we did teach you guys something new, and we hope you guys enjoyed it. Many of you have suggested it, so hopefully you're happy we finally covered it. Thank you guys so much for listening to the show today and every week that we record this crazy podcast. Friendly reminder that if you like the show, to go leave a 5-star rating and review. It really is the best way to spread the word. We've gotten like 10 to 12 like new ratings on Spotify, and Spotify has not left a review function. But we really appreciate that as well, because that's like the second biggest platform for streaming. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for everyone that's left a 5-star rating there. And friendly reminder to also download and subscribe so that you don't miss an episode, and so that it actually tells us that you've listened, because things are weird. And like Sierra said at the head of the episode, if you are listening on any platform, take a screenshot, tag us. It really does mean the world. Go check out our Patreon if you're craving some more twisted content. And before we roll on out of here, Sierra, tell me something happy that's going on in your world.
My hold for that book that I told you about has finally come through, and I'm reading that book now. The one where the author wrote the foreword, like, this is for all of the people who thought that Rory and Jess belonged together, and everybody else, you're wrong. Reading that book, and it's great. It's going really good. I'm loving it. Speaking of books, by the way, I haven't mentioned on here, I redid my podcast room.
Yeah.
My library, guys. Ta-da! You can see it on my TikTok.
That's fun. Yeah, I'll just say mine's books too. And if you want to catch more of myself, I think I mentioned this already, but I'm going to mention it again just in case. You can find me on episode 124 of Where the Weird Ones Are, talking about some spooky shit.
Yeah.
And in the meantime,
keep it twisted.
Twisted and Uncorked is a proud member of Weirding Way Media. Hosted and produced by Sierra Zorn and Alicia Watson. If you like the show, don't forget to leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you are listening now. It really is the best way to spread the word. You can check out all things Twisted on our website, twistedanduncorked.com, and we will see you next Tuesday for a brand new episode.